said, I think we should probably call this meeting to order. East Bay Charter Township Parks Commission, and today is the 19th, July 19th, 2021. Now, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commissioner LaRose, would you mind doing roll call?
Stasinski,
Here.
Andres,
Here.
Walsh,
Here.
Garland,
Here.
Layton,
Here.
LaRose, here.
And does anybody want to make a motion to approve the agenda? Motion in a
I
second.
make a motion to approve tonight's agenda, Monday, July 19th.
Motion by Garland, support by LaRose. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Review for conflict of interest. Do we usually have that in our agendas? I don't remember.
Don't. I've never seen it there before.
You don't? We're looking at trying to standardize some of the portions across the agendas.
Okay,
So it's a good thing to happen. You guys do make some decisions on large parks and purchases and grants and so forth, so.
okay. So is this what I just usually go through it is, ask everybody if there is anything that they want to bring up?
Everyone will be like,
Okay.
"Oh, we're good."
All right, Commission, anybody have any conflicts of interest? All right, moving along. Public comment. Is there anybody from the public that would like to give public comment? All right, making this really easy. Approval of the minutes, June 21st, 2021, regular meeting. If anybody wants to make any edits or changes, otherwise I'll take a motion in a second.
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Support.
All right, motion by LaRose, support by Garland. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Down to item H, correspondence. Minutes from the Board of Trustees, June 14th, 2021, and the June 28th, 2021. The Planning Commission, June 1st, 2021, June 15th, 2021, and June 29th, 2021. And the Zoning Board of Appeals, there was no June meetings. Has anybody got any input, feedback, anything they'd like to address related to these meetings? All right, not hearing anything, I'll move along to item I, reports. Treasurer, revenue and expenditures report, balance sheet.
Okay. As usual, we spent money on our board meetings. We spent money on our special meetings. Well done. Turn the page. Looking at your balance sheets for East Bay Township, Fund 101 General Fund. The audit's done. And so at next month's meeting, we have to take any readjustments and also known as any requests to the board for our fund balance. So if we want to do things, as an example, the things we talked about in April, pause for dramatic effect. Our priorities were warming hut. I wrote down dog park, but think of that as the water tower, which if you ever talk to Beth, she calls it Hammond Park. So should come up with a name for what we want to start calling that. The community garden, for those of you that are new, if you real quick pop and look at your sheet, you'll see it says Jen's Park fundraiser. It says fundraiser because that word has carried over for years and years and years. But the money is there because we are going to make improvements. Do you remember us talking about the improvements when we were there? But we didn't make them because the water table had risen. So Jen's Park was one of our priorities, and we do have money earmarked for that, so we can keep that there. And then the last one I wrote was woodland, and I think that was pertaining to that big 5-mile park development that we were joining with a few other organizations, so I think that's all pretty much just being settled. So according to my notes, our priorities were the warming hut, the Hammond Park, and the community garden. We have the money for Jen's, and I think woodland is on its way. So, next month, we have to go to the boards with our allocated funds. So what we're looking at, so if you go and you look at the fund balance, in the red boxes, you've got the Grace McDonald Park improvements, the Gen Park fundraiser, which I talk about, the Little Library fundraiser, the parks construction, and the trails. Now, the trails is earmarked. And next meeting, we will have information on where that is earmarked to go to. The parks construction restricted and the Grace McDonald Park improvements, those things have been made, but they're still sitting in the fund balance. So that is money that if we don't reallocate it, it goes back to the general fund balance for the township.
So that was for Grace Park improvements?
Uh-huh,
So,
And-
110,000?
right.
And what was the other one?
Parks construction restricted. Those projects are completed, and the money is still in our fund balance, but it won't be if we don't say something. Current balance. All right, let's see. Arbutus number 5, clearly that's Arbutus number 5. It only says 30,000. There's been 300,000 earmarked for that project. It hasn't shown up on our fund balance sheet. Again, we'll get that information next month. Future land purchases for the new commissioners. My first year on the Park Commission, we opened up a future park land purchase for the sole intent of purchasing something if it shows up. So we're purposefully putting money into an account, so if there's this amazing property and we're like, we want that, then we've got a head start. So that's the future park. Arbutus number 5. Okay, so what I have to tell you, we have to think about, before next meeting, what we're going to need. What do we need for the warming hut? What do we need for the dog park, or the thing I said that just left my brain? Hammond Park. So we have to not make the decision tonight, but we have to be thinking about it. It has to be on our radar. For next month's meeting, and next month's meeting, we'll have more information on where some of these earmarked funds, what they're earmarked for.
With some kind of general ideas of cost for each one of those?
Nope.
And then next month, we have to decide, okay, we want 30,000 here, 40 there. Because actually, what are we talking about, 118,000?
Well, we don't,
So we're looking to kind of project what we need out of the
Yes, we need to
fund
project
balance
what
for
we-
next year, so
Right, but
the warming hut,
The way I
predicted
understand it,
cost.
that 118,000 is out there, and if we don't use it, we lose it. So there's where I'm saying 118,000, we need to be coming.
we can
up
ask,
with
we can ask for
exactly-
more. We can ask for more, we can ask for less. This is just what happens to be there. But that's not like, we're not locked into that amount. That's just what's on our current balance sheet. And then we also spent $1,000 on pickleball nets, and the pickleball people are very happy, and that didn't show up on this. It'll be on here next month.
So 117,000. And the pickleball courts are wonderful. So thank you very much. They're great.
I have a quick question about the Jens Park fundraiser. So what was that 21,510, is that, mainly for like building boardwalk or?
Yeah,
yes.
so we were going to, if you remember us talking about it a month ago, we were gonna put a stamped concrete pathway that was wider, but looked natural. And then some handicap accessible picnic tables, benches. And the reason we wanted to put that stamped concrete pathway in is so that we could get heavy equipment to the beach and back for any type of cleanup or beach access that we might need.
I'm just thinking with, the prices going up and stuff, you might want to, if this is something that we could feel like we're going to have an opportunity to do, we might want to, update the quotes to see where it's at, because we might have to actually budget more money on top of that, is what I'm thinking. Just, I don't know what the odds
Just
is.
kind of, it was ready to roll. We had the money allocated, we had the people to do it, and then they went there and it was underwater.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's at the point where we can actually do anything with it yet or not. I mean, are you guys aware of, are we able to do anything with it?
People, it is now wetland.
Yeah, I bet it is. So that's
So that means
a
it-
few years,
It can't be touched, right?
not wetland. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
We haven't been in discussions with them to identify any improvements which can be made or anything like that.
Okay, so we're just at a standstill for now, okay. So I guess we can't really worry about that until,
You got enough other things going too.
Well, you could still do the new picnic tables that we talked about, right?
well, I don't know if there's a spot to put them though, because,
Because we were gonna put a path, so do you remember the tree line?
Yeah.
We were gonna put a stamped path across the tree line and then have ADA accessible, two ADA accessible picnic tables. But now we probably can't put that
Okay.
stamped path in there.
so it's probably just better to hold
I'm
off entirely. Okay, all right.
We can still allocate.
We
Well,
can keep the money there.
Yeah, we keep the money. I was just wondering if we needed to put more money into it or plan for more money.
And, correct me
But it
if I'm
sounds
wrong,
like no.
but we had the permits to make any changes to that park. Are they now expired?
Which part?
Jen's?
I don't believe we have the permits yet.
Because I remember we had some sort of approval to go in here and, to go in and make changes.
We did not, we made those thoughts, ideas, and the next step was going to go to get that approval, but then the cost factor ditched everything.
Okay.
Because that was like,
I was under the impression that we had the permits to go forward with the construction, but then when they saw the water level, they got intimidated and decided not to do anything.
Well, I guess,
Oh, come on up.
yep, please.
Please.
If I talk from back there, Joe, rightly so, gets a little upset because you don't have a microphone. So Corey did a really nice job talking with you about the balance sheet. It's not always easy to interpret that and understand how those funds are being moved around. That is something, like she said, to keep on the radar. It'll be on your agenda next month. Understand, though, that those projects do not have to be funded in whole by money in your fund balance. They can be, they can't be. Some project might be some larger project where you're just putting in some seed money. So for example, Hammond Park's a good one. There's a little bit to do out there. And as you guys know, because you've taken stuff through consultants, through the engineers, to get it ready for grant funding. There's considerable cost on that. We have an expert who does this all the time here. And it's expensive, it's time-consuming, and you need to have seed money. So sometimes if you put something, and that's exactly what, say, for example, that .056 was, that was seed money. The restricted was money that came from a source where it needed to be in the Parks Commission. It was not meant to fully fund a project, but to be used somewhere. The other thing is, we'll also be bringing to you the department budget for 751 for next year. In that, you can determine to what's your operations for next year, as far as your board and so forth, but also what projects maybe you intend on doing, which ones maybe you want to take through your grant funding, that sort of thing. The warming hut is a really good example. We just got the schematics of what the warming hut will look like, and as a matter of fact, I will print those out and get those to you. I think you'll be pretty happy with them. There's a couple little tweaks, but really very nice. So in your budget for next year, you'll want to have the grant writer, getting to the grant, and then any engineering on that and design and so forth, because it's just a schematic at this point. But you may not need to have the entire project, because if it goes to a grant in, I think they're due in April, then not awarded till later that year, you're not really constructing until the next construction season, so.
So when you're saying seed money, you're thinking kind of like attorney, engineer, grant fees? So we want to allocate,
So, in your operational budget, or your annual budget, you could dedicate some funding in your next year's budget for that. Say, well, we're going to spend $10,000 getting this project ready for grant funding application. Or if it's a bigger project, like Hammond Park, you may say, we're going to put aside, $20,000 or $30,000 getting that project fully developed and ready. But we may not do all of that in that year. So for example, that 056 is a good example. That was, gosh, Corey, was that back in like 2017 or 18?
it's been a while.
When Norte came to us.
Yeah.
And so we identified about 40,000 that we wanted to put aside for seed money. Now, so far, we've done everything out of our operational money, and so we really haven't gone back and lowered that fund balance. But those are some of the adjustments. So you'll be seeing those two things, where you want to set your fund balances, and then what the budget for next year will be too. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Corey, for conveying that. It was great.
Wait, you said two things, where to set fund balance in the budget for next year. So then in August, we'll have our to-do list for 2022, which sounds kind of funny, because like in 2022, number 5 will actively be working, but we're thinking to 2023, 2024, what we want to have done.
Okay.
Which,
So
as
every-
was identified back in February, was the Warming Hut, Hammond's Park, community parks, or community garden, Jen's, which is kind of just in holding pattern.
So in our homework for next meeting, we should come prepared with our thoughts and ideas, right? So we can hash this out and figure exactly.
Yeah, I
what
mean,
else.
we've, how many of you were here in February? Stephanie, were you?
No, this is my second meeting.
And then what about, she wasn't here. So it was at least 4 of us, 5 of us identified those priorities. Am I missing a priority?
I don't believe so.
But I don't think so.
'Cause I
'Cause that's, I mean,
figured we were just trying to determine 2, and then we came up with 3. because I know we were talking about Warming Hut, Dog Park, and then, we brought the community garden up, and then that kind of turned into the focus.
We had a dog park subcommittee, but then he moved to Seattle.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so next meeting will be the meeting that we'll be determining what we want to ask for.
But I don't know how to come up with numbers on what to ask for. So I'm not gonna sit here and be able to tell you, we need this money for we need this much for the warming park, we need this much for the Hammond Park. Because I'm saying dog park, but we've also talked about paved path,
Exercise.
With exercise
senior
equipment.
Yeah.
so it's bigger than this, just a dog park.
Okay.
And then for those of you that don't know, because of the nature of the water tower area, it can't be permanent. In case they need to expand. Right? In case they need to expand?
I mean, they don't want you to put an Olympic-sized swimming pool there.
Why? It's an awesome water source.
The water tower can have like a water fountain.
Okay. Well, I have a pretty good idea of what we
Okay.
need to do for next meeting, and I think we could probably make some pretty good educated guesses, and I'm sure Beth will help us along.
Previous experience with cost.
Right.
And then a contingency, I don't know, it used to be 15%. Has it gone up since then?
Just depends what project.
Yeah. Okay.
So going back to the fund balance, Jens Park, we want to keep it there. Should we just leave that little library thing there? Is it?
We've used those funds and then percent up them, so we can probably drop that to zero.
Okay. Parks, capital trails, again, we're gonna have more information on that next month, excuse me. We're gonna have more information on this next month, and we're gonna have, the parks is gonna stay there. We'll probably have to add to it, ask to add to it, so that it keeps building and building.
Didn't we used to get like a worksheet prior to that broke down each park, or no? And where we could take from here and then add over to this?
I'm not sure specifically what
For the
document you're
budget.
talking about,
Okay. Oh,
but I feel Joe staring at me.
Were you talking about increasing the future parkland purchase one? Just now?
Yeah.
Okay.
396.000, future park land purchases. Every year, we wanna put money into that.
So this current number is from multiple years of growth of just adding money to it, like a rainy day fund?
So, because then it was 0 when I came on. It was a new line item.
It's a couple years, I think the Parks Commission decided to add that. Probably has been added some years and maybe not some others. Sometimes there are other priorities that take
Sure.
place. So for example, next year, as you guys know, we were awarded the ability to go and do the $600,000 project at Arbutus number 5. So we did, we know that we have looked at our fund balances and know where the funds are coming from. 110,000 from Grace McDonald was a big portion of that. It just hasn't physically been moved from an accounting standpoint. So that's one of the things that will come to you next month with kind of that history. Listen, in this month, we had allocated this, so we need to move that sort of thing. Because we'll need to have 300,000 identified into a capital budget for this next year's 2022 budget.
Yeah, that's the match, right? Okay. All right. Does anybody have more?
What about, I hate to jump forward, so I won't. So in our brains for next month, we've got the hut, park,
community garden.
thank you, community garden. And then the park land improvement, and then getting all the allocated funds into Arbutus number 5.
And again, I wouldn't be concerned if we don't have final numbers on those or anything like that. Some of them may be some time off, some of them may be closer, but we can estimate and gauge from some other projects and based on the timing too.
It took 6 years to get number 5, so.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, we're going to move along here. Number 2, I2, no subcommittee reports. So we'll move along to business before the Parks Commission, the swing set modification update.
I didn't see anything
Was that,
in the packet.
yeah, it just goes from,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, there isn't anything included in the packet.
Okay.
Just to let you know, when we're taking a look at the parks, so for example, be adding one into Pine Grove Park. I haven't taken a look at that, though, with Bob Burns, and so we'll do that and make those adjustments, purchase them, and get them installed, but report back to you
Okay.
on what parks seem appropriate for that.
and that was all the seat that you showed us, the $900 seat.
So, yes, in the packet from last month, there was the seat. It was blue and it had a rainbow stripe on the, what do you call that? The
Shoulder
belt
harness.
buckle,
Yeah.
shoulder
Harness,
harness,
yeah.
thank you. That was a suggestion from the resident, which I think is a great seat. However, I researched more of a commercial, heavy-duty one,
Yeah.
and that was the green one that was in there. It's obviously a little bit more expensive, but the type of wear and tear that it will receive in the
Yeah, I have
parks.
the blue one for my daughter. That is
Okay.
a home use.
Yeah,
And then
that's,
the commercial one that you researched is the ones that you see at the schools.
right. So I think it was fantastic for the resident to offer to purchase one, and that was very, very gracious of them to want to do that for not only their child, but on behalf of other children. But the township does have the resources and the availability to be able to purchase a handicap swing for those purposes, so I think that that's a good thing to do. My question to you, and I'm sorry I didn't get to be at the last meeting to ask, but Pine Grove was one where we naturally thought of. And then Grace McDonald, obviously. The other two places that I wondered that your feedback was Killingsworth. And then, of course, we'll be redoing Arbutus, and the parks, the play area is not part of that phase. If you remember, that's a subsequent phase. But as we may be able, we'll see where the budgets fall. We may be able to tuck a few improvements in there depending on what costs are. I'm not sounding really hopeful because if you guys have tried to do any projects lately or seen any costs, or even obtaining some of the materials you need, it's been difficult. I'm hoping obviously we're in a better position next year. But, so those were the two parks, Arbutus and Arbutus and Killingsworth. I was wondering if you had an opinion on.
Killingsworth is not ADA accessible. If the child is in a wheelchair.
It's hard to get to that area.
It's just it's dirt, it's really bumpy,
Slopey.
and it has the railroad tile parking lot boundary, so I would not recommend
Okay.
Killingsworth.
So, do you think it's on the right track with Grace McDonald and Pine Grove?
For sure.
Okay.
Pine Grove, the swing sets weren't up in that built area, were they?
No.
They were off on their own.
Right. So we can start with those two then, and then see the usage and, okay?
I'd only suggest when looking at Grace McDonald is, because they'll probably have to, unless you're using the same bays, which would take away other swings, you might have to find make sure it's within a certain distance away from other swings and play areas, and I don't know how tight it's packed back there or not, or,
And that's why I hesitate on saying anything specific about Grace, because I haven't looked at it from that perspective yet. Although I will say, my preference in looking at things would be to replace a swing that's in an existing bay, only because I learned from doing the accessibility with Arbutus and some of the other reviews that we've been through, it's not just providing the opportunity for someone who is disabled to participate, but it's to have them participate with others too. So not be on a separate swing that's, 5 or 10 feet away, but to feel that they're, not to feel, but that they are involved in the activity. So if we do need to add more swings. My preference, just in operating the parks, would be that we would include the handicap accessible with the bulk of the swings, and then maybe add something a little bit different with any additional swings. I'm seeing some nods here, is that, okay?
Yeah.
Sounds like I'm on the right track then?
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
Yeah, there are not enough swings at Grace.
Okay.
I was just kind of concerned about mixed matching types of swings. And then the wheelchair swings, I wasn't sure if that was something we were looking at, but I hear those are pretty
I think that
dangerous and probably not preferred,
they're
but,
pretty phenomenal. I mean, that you can just, I mean, they're pretty slick when you look at them. I think that that would be something really exciting to do. Do you know how many parks in the Grand Traverse area have those?
I don't know of any. I just know that, from the guy that I work with, that I kind of bounce a lot of this playground stuff off of. He says it's not something that's, really recommended because of, a lot of safety concerns with just bystanders. But usually, I imagine if it's there, you'd probably have it enclosed in a fenced area, but.
I hear what you're saying about the safety issue. However, I do know that GTI, I don't remember what GTI stands for. So when a individual ages out of the school system and they have a severe disability, they go to GTI. These people use Grace as their go-to park. They go there for picnics, they go there for recreation, and they go there for fun. And they have wheelchair individuals in the fully automatic, very heavy wheelchairs that would love that swing.
I actually have ran into a group that had arrived at Grace just after we did the improvements with the parking lot. And as part of those improvements, not intended, but brought on by a resident's observation when they attended a graduation or family reunion at the pavilion, was that they noticed that they could not get, I think it was an elderly family member in the wheelchair, very easily over to the pavilion. Luckily, that recommendation came to us just before that project was put in, so we very simply just extended and added that walkway. After the improvements were done, I was over there checking some things out, and they were there to use the park and offered such tremendous feedback to the township and the Parks Commission on providing that opportunity. They were incredibly thankful. They said every time they come, it's hoofing wheelchairs across very uneven terrain, very difficult, very hard, and this allowed them to enjoy the activities much easier with more individuals, and so they were very, very thankful to the Parks Commission for providing that opportunity. And I think that the opportunity that we're mentioning here with the swings, and to the extent of how many swings, would be also appreciated, but also worth the research in determining if we could do something that offered some additional usage,
Yeah.
and maybe with some, specific research on the safety as well. And I don't know if some of these, anytime, feel free to come into the township. We get a lot of catalogs. I mean, you can look at them online too, but I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I get tired of looking on the screen time. And so the catalogs have some fantastic things in there. Play equipment that is universally accessible, where children don't realize they're playing on universally accessible play equipment. It's just fun. So it's pretty cool.
Okay.
So maybe they have something.
I'd be interested. Yeah, I mean, all I got is the input of the one guy, but I respect a lot of what he says, so just, I'd be interested to know more about those things, but, I totally understand where he was coming from about the safety concerns, but, especially depending how high the swing goes up, and, a little child could, fall between and get crushed, or, so I don't know. I guess it's worth the research, so.
It's really good to have some of that practical knowledge, so it kind of heads off some pitfalls that you might avoid, so.
Yeah, and he was pretty quick to say, don't do it. So I'm just like, I don't know. But
That
that doesn't mean it's worth,
introduced me to him.
All right, well, we'll move along here to community garden engagement plan draft.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Okay, so at our last meeting, last month, we talked about the scope of work for this project, and we made some tweaks, and that's in your packet, based on our discussion. So you clarified who the partners were in the project, including the library and Seeds, the schools, and others, MSU Extension, et cetera. So those details have been added into the scope of work, and you'll see that there. Do you have any questions or suggestions, further changes to make to that document, which describes kind of the overall project flow from planning to implementation? And if not, what we'll talk about tonight is the specific engagement plan. So how do we propose to actually move forward the first phase of the project, the planning piece, informed by your community input? So what I want to talk to you tonight is that draft engagement plan in your packet. It's just 2 pages. And really what I want to talk about is the proposed activities that are bulleted on page 1. And then from there, we'll move into the audiences, make sure we've identified everyone we need to learn from and work with. And then we'll talk through our tactics and messaging. So those are the 3 big topics I wanted to make sure I had your buy-in on tonight. So the activities portion, the first suggestion, and I call it a garden planning team. We could call it something much more exciting. That's probably a subcommittee, which I would say is sounding less exciting. So maybe we call it something exciting followed by subcommittee. But that would be the team. If you are amenable, this also could just be the full Parks Commission. But what I was looking for here was perhaps some flexibility in the timeline so that if we need to move on a task before your next meeting, this team could meet separately to do that and then come back to you with a report as you've done in the past with projects like the dog park. And we can add into this committee's rules that no one can move to Portland or Seattle or wherever that person took off to. So this planning team would just be able to move the needle maybe a little bit faster and outside of kind of these regular business hours, though those conversations would be open to the public and anyone who's interested, including all of you, could attend. So I think that's a question for this team. Do you want to keep this conversation at this level? Would you like to move this into a smaller group? The other advantage of moving this into a smaller group, I think, is that you could invite representatives from those other agencies that have previously raised their hand to help you implement, including MSU Extension, the library, maybe even a local resident who has interest and could help inform the project. And that might be a friendly format for those folks to engage instead of asking them to attend every meeting you hold here. Just a thought. So I don't think there's a way to go wrong here, but either identify yourselves as the garden movers and shakers, or form a smaller team to do that and maybe invite some outside representation to help inform that process. So that's step 1, form your team in my proposal, open to feedback, and I'll just run through the rest and then take your questions. And then that team or you can identify the project knowns, unknowns, and needs. In our last conversation, you identified a few needs already. So how many residents in the township are interested in using the garden? What is the price point that would be appropriate for those folks? What does the design look like to serve those users? What are the maintenance costs? Could this be offered freely to residents? And then what are some of the specifics around like irrigation needs and those kinds of things? So we have a pretty good list, I think, of what those unknowns are, but it would be good for this team to put that to paper and bring it to the Parks Commission to say, here's what we're kind of working from as a group. And then from there, when we have our unknowns and needs listed, we can identify what questions we have for the community. So an immediate question is, do you want to use this garden? What price point would be acceptable? And we'll wordsmith those. But from that needs list, we start to identify what we need to know from residents and other community members and partners like the schools, et cetera. We work through our engagement process using a number of tools: online survey, focus groups, an event, individual interviews, probably a combination of those. And then from there, work with a professional, either a landscape architect or an engineer, to update the garden plan based on those engagement results and based on the expertise of that garden planning team and your partners. Then we identify potential funding sources to implement that plan and move towards implementation. And a lot of these pieces can be happening simultaneously. So we can start right now kind of a working list of funding sources and make sure those timelines are on our radar. Different funders will have different comfort levels, if we're looking at grants, for example, with the level of detail involved. So one funder might be really jazzed about just the conceptual stage we're at now, and one funder might want to see those very specific, details laid out. And we can think about how that relates too with like a community crowdfunding campaign too, and what kind of details we need in place before going to fundraise. And then creating an action plan for breaking ground, and I put tentatively in the spring or summer of 2022. These days, it feels really hard to put timelines to projects, but I think much of this work could be accomplished. If we really get to it, I think this could be accomplished in the fall and winter, and then looking to break ground sometime next year. And I realize gardeners want to start earlier than summer, but some success is better than no success. So I think next year, it's sometime during a good weather could be a good opportunity to break ground. So just at that broad level, what concerns, questions, ideas do you have looking at that list? Any glaring activity or glaring omission there? Anything you'd like to change in the list?
So the subcommittee, could they meet through Zoom?
I am
Or anyway?
open to your leadership there, unless the township has a policy that doesn't allow for Zoom meetings now.
Subcommittee would need to hear you on the meetings act, which doesn't allow for Zoom right now.
Okay, so we'd be meeting in person.
So didn't we already have a current team with 2 commissioners on it? Is that kind of where we want to continue going with that, or do you want to include the entire commission through the entire process? Because it might be hard if there's going to be, multiple meetings, throughout a month or something,
It can help speed things up if you want to meet. Much of this work doesn't require a full month to fact find and then bring back, so if we could meet in 2 weeks and then meet again as a full commission, it just helps move things along. And you've done so much work to date that it feels to me like we're not starting from.
Sure. Well, I'd be in favor of, keeping the 2 representatives that we have from the commission, and then, I think we had someone from MSU Extension. Are they still involved? Yeah, I'd be okay with continuing that unless anybody opposes.
Well, I think our need is the public involvement. That's still a big question on how to reach out and get that. I'd like to see someone in the public be on this subcommittee. And I don't know if we want a 3rd commissioner on the subcommittee or not. But I definitely, somehow we got to reach out and get someone from the public.
Yeah, I'd say we have a preliminary team. We can make it bigger if we would like. We've identified project nodes, nodes and needs, and I think we're definitely on step 3. Identify questions for community engagement.
So the preliminary team currently is 2 commissioners, 1 MSU extension person, and then, is it those 3?
Mm-hmm.
And I'd recommend, if there's interest, extending an invitation to someone from the local school system, because I think that could be a huge audience, right, when we actually implement, potentially also the library. And then.
We have, and they all were pretty much build it and we will come. I don't know how much involvement they wanted to be in the planning committee.
Okay.
What about the seats?
Same
They're on
thing.
board, but they're more hands-on.
Okay.
Once we have that plan in place, then they want a direction of their talents, and at that point, at least that's how I understood that.
I think if we, okay, hold on. I think if we got that community feedback and had the updated garden plan, I think then we would see a lot more of the people that we've already reached out to. I think then we would start to see a lot more involvement.
Mhm.
If we were like, okay, this is the committee, and this is where we're at, and this is what we're gonna build, we wanna pull you in, then I think we're gonna get more response. Because right now, I think they're just kind of waiting to see, something to tangible.
That's.
But, you know,
makes
in
sense.
that, in that sense too, like with the schools, there's so many of them in this little corner, to reach out to each of them and whether they themselves think of ideas or thoughts of how they would utilize that space, you know, if they became part of it. Would that entail that they would have to attend a meeting? I don't know. You know, maybe just by an email of introduction. This is what we're thinking. We're still at the beginning stages. What's your insight? What's your purpose? What would you use it as?
Yeah, I think you'll see in the engagement plan that they're listed as an audience and that we definitely want to do and reintroduce the project to all of the partners. Just to say, we're back at it, right? And this is you know, we're going to be breaking ground, provide that basic timeline, provide kind of an opportunity to engage. And I think for some partners, just being involved in the preliminary planning, even if they're not making every meeting, it makes it so much easier when you go to write the grant to have a letter of support, right? So, you know that project we've been emailing you on every month? We love your support for this grant that we're putting together. You don't have to do a thing, here's a draft letter. You know, that, it just helps, I think, maintain those relationships. And if the most recent contact from some of these partners was sort of a good idea, and then it, just because of everything going on in the world, it's gone quiet, it would be a good time to say, we're coming back online, we're forming this vehicle to plan for the library, this is our next step. I'm sorry, I don't know why I said library for the garden. Last night I was at a meeting about bathrooms, so it's a good thing I didn't slip up there. And then would you like to engage as a planning member? Would you like to just stay tuned with updates? We don't have such a long partner list here that we can't personalize those conversations and really rebuild that relationship. So maybe we ask the question, and if folks say thanks, just as before, we're happy just to stay involved when you get the plan in place, then we've reconfirmed their interest in that portion of the project. But I don't think it hurts to over-communicate about the intent.
Okay.
And with Michigan State, there was Nate, and I can't remember the lady's name that stepped in, I want to say it was Carrie, that she also had a strong interest. And I don't know, Nate was the beginning years ago, it seems like.
We
And
had
then-
Susan White from 4-H, who's the East Bay resident. We had Jennifer Flynn from Seeds and the SNAP education, and then we had Nate.
And this was after Nate. And I
Right,
have
and then
it at
after
home.
Nate,
Was it Jennifer? Yeah, I have the notes at home.
oh, hi Claire, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so essentially we
either
have a
way-
short list of people who'd be interested and
Would you say over-communicate?
Yeah, I don't think it hurts, because folks they don't have to read a full email if they don't want to.
Yeah.
worst case scenario, we can invite people and if they choose to participate, they can, and if not.
No, organizations do it to us all the time. I mean, we're constantly reading things, we're like, you don't have to do anything, but we're doing this, and one of these days, we're gonna need your support. And then like 3 years later, we're like, oh, yes, I remember you, here's our support. So, no, I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
And we won't continue to pester folks if they politely opt out, but I think it's a good opportunity just to reengage. And then to put some of those documents, our knowns and our needs and our unknowns to paper, just so we're working from the same assumptions. And from there, we really do identify what the questions are we're looking for from the community and how best to ask them. Because I can tell you, if you ask what price would you pay for a garden bed, and there's a $0 option, that's absolutely what everyone will select. So we'll want to design thoughtful engagement that really solicits the information we're looking for. And maybe it's not a survey, maybe it's a series of focus groups where folks can drop in to talk with us. You know, we can think about that. So that's what this team would be really starting out from. We'd be formalizing, I'd probably prepare kind of a draft. We'd first invite those folks to join us. We'd then work from a draft list of knowns, unknowns, needs, which I think you already have, but let's just get it in one place. And then we'd work from that to create our community engagement kind of next steps and bring that back to the Parks Commission for implementation. And so with that, could we move to the engagement portion of the document? So there's those audiences identified. We have a great survey list from the master plan survey. Claire, I think that's about 500 residents at last count, maybe more. And those folks are very engaged. Many of these people, like Susan, participated in the focus group series that we just held, and community garden came up in several of those conversations. So there's a lot of interest, I think, in that list, at least from a few folks. Then there's also a business owners list. I'm not clear on how many businesses are in this list and whether it would be an appropriate audience to survey for this group, but that's an option. And then this community stakeholders, so the library, the 4 schools. Norte has a pretty robust East Bay Township list, and obviously that's really focused on families with children, which I think is a great audience for this project. TART also has a really solid East Bay Township list, also focused on all sorts of users, so that would be another opportunity. And then MSU Extension Office, SEEDS, and then you mentioned at our last meeting that you were learning from other community garden organizations, and I wondered if they weren't also someone that we wanted to touch base with formally throughout the project, or if you felt like working those relationships as you are already doing one-on-one is suitable. But I know you were doing a lot of learning with other communities, so wanted to provide an opportunity to kind of bring that into the process. And then, of course, the Township Board and Planning Commission. Are we missing anyone? Anyone you'd add to that list?
No, I don't think so. I kind of want to say the Conservation District, but probably not. I don't know. I think they're probably pretty busy.
The Grand Traverse Conservation District or the Grand Traverse Land Conservancy?
Grand Traverse Conservation District is what I was thinking. I mean, the original Land Conservancy might have an interest too, I don't know, but I'm guessing, I'm just thinking, I think they have some staff that are into this gardening stuff, so.
Right. Yeah, actually, I think that's a great idea, Ryan. I was just poking around their website, and, right, they have a lot of programming geared towards, again, families with kids too, so.
What's on Cass Street?
Nature Education Reserve?
Yeah.
Grand Traverse Conservation District.
Yep,
Okay.
that's
Yep.
the one.
Yeah, that's who I'm referring to, I'm sorry. Okay. You need us to, I mean, I think this is a good plan to start with, and is there any further action you need from us other than, giving our nod?
Yeah, I would love your nod, and then also, let's review next steps so that I have my to-do list walking away from this meeting. So I'm going to, who am I working with from this group? Corey
Me and
and Susan? Anyone else? Are we nominating anyone else from the team? You mentioned 3 potentially.
And I'd offer, but I honestly don't think I'll be able to follow through, so I don't want to overcommit.
Sure. Okay, then I think our next step then is to send out invitations to those partners we've identified, provide them a project update, and then see if they're interested in joining that planning team. Is that something that you're comfortable with me sending without you seeing that invitation? Would you like to see it at your next meeting before that goes out?
Can we do it can we see it? Do you guys want to see it, or should just me and Sue see it?
I'd be okay with you guys checking it out and giving the thumbs up. I mean, I don't think that really needs the full board approval to ask for
I'm
people
comfortable
interested at.
Having to do it, but, yeah, I mean, if you want to shoot out an email before, that's fine, but I feel totally comfortable. I'm very grateful that she's here to get the wheels moving again. It's a lot, there's a lot involved,
Yeah, there is.
yeah.
No, I don't think the whole board has to see it. I just think Sue and I'd like to.
What if we,
That's a weird face. Why are you making that face? Yes, you. Oh, okay.
I'm just waiting for, no one said that's a violation of the OMA yet, so.
I know, I'm kind of
plugging
waiting for
along.
that too.
I don't think that is, but.
I wouldn't think
I'd
so.
like to have a staff member take a look
Yep.
at something that goes out, so if you want to send
You're
it
on
to
my
Claire,
list.
that would be great.
Okay, yep, Claire, I had Beth there, but yep.
Yeah, I was waiting for the same thing.
and what if we come up with a community member that might really be excited to join
Yeah.
this? Should we
Yes.
just contact you?
Yes.
And then, okay. I have a neighbor that I'm thinking of.
I bet there's a lot of them out there. We just got
Well, I
to.
mean, I imagine that they're public meetings, anybody can come to these at any time,
Yeah,
so I
but to
mean,
know about it, you might need a personal invitation, that's right.
Right.
So,
Just so we could get someone on the subcommittee would be wonderful
Yeah.
from the public.
So then, once we have those folks identified, we'll query the group and find out a meeting time that works. Ideally, that happens before our next meeting. And then we'll meet and review that list of knowns, unknowns, needs, and then potentially also a list of kind of our draft, how we go next to the community, and just get that process started for learning purposes. How does that sound?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, great. Well, that's all I had, so thank you all very much.
And so you will contact like Corey and myself through email, right?
Yes,
And then we should be thinking of a date prior to, before August 16th, the
Yes.
next meeting.
Yep, so I'll send you two
Time.
pieces, including Claire. I'll send you the draft invitation, kind of describing the project, and please join us if you're interested. And then I'll also identify before doing that, before sending that out to partners, I'll identify your availability, so we have a date that works for the two of
Okay.
you, before we invite other folks to the table.
Okay.
Okay? Great, thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're doing this. Okay.
All right, moving forward to the 3 Mile Trail Extension, Tart Trails.
They should be giving their full name. They should be giving their full name.
Is this her, Julie?
Julie Clark.
Okay. I'm not gonna kill myself. Maybe. Is this critical?
It's the charger, but it's fully charged.
Wait.
Don't worry about it.
I'm not gonna worry about it tonight. Thank you for having us. My name is Julie Clark. I'm the Executive Director of Tart Trails. With me this evening is Elizabeth Calcott, also with Tart Trails. She's our project manager. So questions and all those things, I'm happy to answer, or Elizabeth too. And I also want to thank Beth and Claire, who have been very involved throughout this whole planning process. They've been just critical and instrumental to moving this forward. So we're excited to be here tonight. I promise I'll be as quick as I can be. I know I have 7 minutes. We'll see how this goes. I just very quickly, project background. If you didn't know, the first section of 3 Mile Trail that goes to South Airport Road was completed in 2006. There was an idea at the time that the Road Commission was going to further that road widening project, which would have brought the trail with it along 3 Mile, and that was supposed to be completed in 2008. We all know today that that did not happen. Right-of-way wasn't acquired, and of course, the road project didn't happen. So we have been working with East Bay throughout these years, but honestly, there was a limited corridor to work with. It's a limited road right-of-way, 66 feet, if you know what it looks like. It's a bit heavy. That indicates there's a lot of wetlands on either side, and then, of course, there are a lot of residential areas on both sides. So fast forward to 2017, and you guys at the board passed a Safe Routes to School resolution. There was a lot of community support, really speaking to, we want to be able to access, I think it was Susan who said, the amount of schools in this area. There are so many. We know that over 2,400 students could be served by this trail. And also, as we were thinking about the trail, what feeds the trail? What are those areas, those corridors that could help feed the trail and get folks to school? So then, sort of magic happened. The Conservancy purchased the old golf course, and that became a potential corridor. So they reached out immediately to TART and said, hey, this is going to happen, what do you think? And that made us reach out immediately to Claire and Beth, and that answered a lot of questions, because the other thing that happened was the east-west corridor study was completed, and that did help inform some major road projects that were happening. Typically, trails go where the land is public, so oftentimes with roads or with utility corridors, or in the case of the Conservancy, they were willing to host a regional trail connection because they were excited about getting folks to their conservation center. So those things, sort of that perfect storm that happened, and we were really excited. In 2020, we had a partnership with East Bay, TART, Norte, and the Regional Land Conservancy. Obviously, the Regional Land Conservancy being pretty pivotal in all of this, being the host. What we didn't know was where it would go. So we started with a bigger scope. We didn't assume that the trail would necessarily go through the Conservancy. We took a look at the 3-mile Hammond corridor, and again, the goal was to connect from that southern end, where the 3-mile trail ends at South Airport Road, down to the school systems. And then talking with Claire, we knew that as the east-west corridor study really did identify those road corridor projects, how could we help East Bay be in front of some of these projects so that you could provide connectivity, help plan, if you will, future developments, to know what type of facilities might be the best type to encourage that livable, walkable, bikeable corridor that is identified in the long-range master plan. So we looked all in this corridor, and we identified a couple of different areas. We didn't put lines on maps for a while, but we knew there were critical connections to be made, again, to the north, to the south, and also looking east and west. We went through a pretty significant public planning outreach process. Elise was one of our consultants that we hired to help us do this. Gosling Subak is the engineering firm, landscape architecture engineering firm, who's doing the actual design work. But we had a couple of consultants help us through, boy, I'm talking fast, I'm just going to keep going. Help us talk through what this could look like. What did people want? What were the values of this trail? What did East Bay want? It's one thing to build a trail. Trails are great, but they're better when people use them the way they want to use them and when they access areas that people want to access. So we did some pretty extensive outreach through public open houses. It was amazing how many people came out on a very cold October day in the rain. A lot of people wanted to talk about the trail and where they wanted to go. We also did an online public survey. Got a lot of good feedback from that, and then we held stakeholder meetings. So we had like a small group of folks made up of the school system, the partners, advocacy groups like Disability Network, the Track Club, Watershed Center, folks like that, who had a specific maybe interest or expertise that they could bring to planning this corridor. So we had a couple of different meetings there, and before that consultant really put pen to paper, they were tasked with listening. And so what they heard when we consolidated it all, and this, by the way, is all on the website, so if you want to see the results from the public or stakeholder meetings, they're all posted there. But the themes that we heard, maybe not surprisingly, were things like connectivity. People wanted to be able to get to the businesses, the schools, the homes nearby. That was a really important thing. They wanted it to be safe. Nobody really got excited when we talked about a trail smashed around 3 Mile Road or bike lanes just on 3 Mile Road with no way for pedestrians to get on there. We also heard, and this was really interesting for us, an emphasis from folks in the southern area, so south of Hammond Road, really pretending or potentially accessing the 3 Mile Trail from the south. So I think sometimes we can be a little too Bay and Traverse City centric, thinking that's, the direction of the flow. But in this case, folks were really from the south saying, hey, we want to be able to access the 3 Mile Trail. So that helped inform, again, how we were going to feed connections up to that 3 Mile Trail. And so that's what we come before you tonight, is we went through several different alternatives. There were lots of lines that were put on maps. But what we identified was the preferred alternative that came through, again, informed by community input. There were a lot of constraints here. It's a very wet area, so we tried to avoid wetland when we could. That meant we did a lot of field investigation. We did a lot of engineering analysis up front so we would know what are we getting ourselves into. It's also really important for our partner at the Conservancy to make sure that wherever the trail's being proposed, it fits their vision and values. And so what was developed and is in front of you today is the preferred alternative for the 3 Mile Trail connecting South Airport Road, actually all the way to the south side of Hammond. So there is a proposed crossing of Hammond. It is not designed at this time. What we know is it will be safe, comfortable, and inviting. We have a lot of work to do with the road commission to make sure that those three things can be true. But that is what we are proposing, and you're also seeing other facilities that were put on there. Again, how are we going to get people to the trail? Where did people want to go? And these lines are really conceptual, and they're meant to actually help Claire in master plan development and future developments. So as the road gets redeveloped or new subdivisions come in, there's a bit of a framework there that they can work with. What are the expectations on how mobility will be provided? So just some schematics on what it's really intended to be. This will be a multi-use trail. This is expected to have some pretty high traffic on it. We expect it to be used for transportation. That's what people said loud and clear. We also expect a lot of families to be on it, whether they're walking their kids to school or biking their kids to school or just out there and enjoying the conservation center. We know this will be a very popular section of the trail. It connects right to the TART system, a 24-mile trail, so we know tourists will likely be on it. It's built for residents. It's built for us, but we know we live in a tourism-based economy still, and so that's something that we expect to see. We know it will be big on recreation, and we also know in the sensitive areas that we're going through, there will be a lot of boardwalk, a lot of boardwalk. That's great opportunities for stewardship and engagement, environmental education, but it also means significant cost, frankly, when you're constructing. So we will, and we plan to, as we move into engineering, focus on areas where there's highland, and that's where we'll put, asphalt and concrete, those things. But we are going to be very sensitive in this area. So there's a lot of boardwalk that's planned.
That's all the orange part is boardwalk?
Orange part, yes, in your conceptual map. Sorry, I'm like, orange, I don't see orange, but yes, it is. So the next steps, this trails are a process, really. What we just got done with is the conceptual planning piece. So this was, again, trying to listen to the community, trying to understand what the connections were that people wanted, what the values, what the priorities were, and also help, again, inform future build-out within East Bay Township along the Hammond 3-mile corridor. The next stage that we would go to is design engineering. And that's really, you end up with construction documents, that thick, and it tells you exactly where the trail is going, how much boardwalk it is, how many tons of asphalt. It's really dialed in. Right now, we're at a very conceptual level still. So it's a comfort level for the Conservancy to be able to okay it. It's a comfort level for permitting agencies to say, yeah, this could work. And MDOT can say, yeah, this could work, but you're going to have to make sure you meet X, Y, and Z. So it's a way to be able to talk to those agencies whom we hope to be working with in the future to get this trail on the ground. The next stage is really where the devil's in the details, and you make sure that the connections work and that you know exactly what you're dealing with on the ground and the soil types you have, all the nitty-gritty stuff. It would change, right? It might go here instead of there. Might be more asphalt than boardwalk or more boardwalk than asphalt. So things are going to change. But ideally, that line is set. So that's what we work with when we get into design engineering is, did the concept work? Can we build what we said we could? We did a little bit more field work up front to make sure that what we put on paper could be built. But the next step, like I said, is pretty detailed design. Then after that, we go to construction. And both of those come with price tags. This is not a cheap project, right? 13 million is kind of the whole ball of wax. So when TART builds trails now, we always include maintenance funds on the front end. So when we fundraise for projects, we are funding for maintenance in the beginning. So that way we have a way to ensure that this trail looks as good, tomorrow and 20 years from tomorrow after it's put on the ground. And so that's where we are today. We are planning to go to the Planning Commission with the same update and same request, which is we hope to be able to present to the board and look for a resolution of support for this preferred alignment. That's not 7 minutes, but I tried.
That's good.
20? Oh, God. She was supposed to zap me, hitting the 10-minute mark. Is there anything I can answer, Elizabeth, or?
No, I thought it was pretty informative.
Tell you with the details here, but we're really excited. It's been pretty fantastic to watch the township residents really come out and speak to what they want and what they want to see, and the enthusiasm behind this, and frankly, the great work that the Conservancy is doing out there gives this a bit more urgency. There's an opportunity here to build with a partner. We are working closely with MDOT. The Safe Routes to School project that's underway, we hope to combine with them, and thanks to Beth and Claire's leadership, being able to work with the Road Commission to make sure when improvements are done on Hammond, you guys have informed them as to what you want and what you envision it to be. So to be ahead of all of this feels pretty darn good right now. So we really appreciate the leadership from East Bay Township and the enthusiasm of the residents. And we're just here to help keep it going.
How are you different, how are you connected with Safe Routes to School? Because they kicked this off, didn't they?
Safe Routes to School back in 2017,
Yeah.
when you did that resolution. Yep, that was the impetus for all of this. We do trails, right? That's kind of what TART does.
Yeah.
So we were there to help with, okay, what would a 3-mile corridor look like? So I would call it a parallel process.
Okay.
So Safe Routes to School kind of did their big assessment of where students live and how they would get there, and then narrowed in on facilities really around the school with, I want to say, the understanding that a 3-mile trail connection would be coming. Is that fair? I'm getting nods.
And they're still involved.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we're not leading that, but that's really Claire that's helping. We're just there to make sure the pieces line up at the end of the day. And we hope to, that's again, part of the excitement here is to build on things. So you guys have the Safe Routes to School grant application going in. That's perfect timing as we continue to design and engineer so that potentially, construction is happening kind of, you don't have to wait another 5 years.
That Safe Routes to School resolution is the reason why we have correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure that's why we have a trail line budget now. Because I think that's what kicked off this.
The 40,000?
Yeah.
You guys were thinking ahead.
And we have, I can't remember for the maintenance of that one, is it the 1 mile?
Right,
So
but I don't think that's in
separate.
our budget. I think that's in
Yeah.
maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's in a Parks budget anymore. I think it started, it generated with the Parks Commission, but I think it moved over.
Remember those? That sticks me back.
Every year.
I remember being here a
Yeah,
lot.
every year.
So Julie, you're looking for a motion of support for this, so, and then the next step would be the planning commission getting support there. So we're just another letter of support, to push for this.
I think it's really important that the township board hear from you guys.
Yeah. Okay. Well, would anybody like to make a motion?
Oh, it's right
There's a
here. I just
proposed
have to
one.
read this, right?
There's a possible motion, bottom of 31.
Yeah, the bottom of 31.
Yeah, please.
So the motion would be in support of that
Yeah.
resolution that's included in your packet. And so that would, we're presenting the same resolution to Planning Commission, and then that would eventually go to the board as well.
I make a motion to support resolution PKS-2021-03 to support the Tarts Trails presentation.
In support of the 3-mile trail extension and preferred alignment. that
We're
work?
so bad at making motions.
Let it-
For Tart 3 Mile Trail Extension,
Okay.
proposed routing plan.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you all.
Brian, can you just recap that was a roll call?
Sure.
Okay. Layton,
Yes.
Garland,
Yes.
Walsh,
Yes.
Andres,
Yes.
LaRose, yes. Stasinski.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We need like a master motion maker worksheet where we're like filling in the blanks.
I'm putting together here that usually when we are voting on a resolution, that we're probably doing roll calls. Okay, sorry. All righty. Well, is there any second public comment?
I'll just take advantage of it.
Did you have to leave?
I do have to leave. But I can't go after listening to Julie's presentation to thank you at the Parks Commission. Whether you were here, whether you've joined, but for your support for the recreation and the investment in parks for our township and its residents, specifically with opportunities like a pedestrian multimodal trail. Recreation opportunities are tremendous for the residents. We've really seen in the past year how much they've used them. And as you've illustrated here, it was really a seed that started here, and that's fantastic. So kudos to you.
All right, last chance. All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion, we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Okay. Meeting adjourned.